Hello, welcome, gorgeous beings of light. This is Elmara coming to you with miracle number 82 in the 100 Miracles in 100 Days project. Let us begin by just taking a big breath as deep as you can into your belly, filling it up to your lungs, in through the nose and then out through the mouth. Letting go of everything outside this moment. Do this several times. Actually, it may be really helpful for you to do it, this kind of breathing throughout this miracle, because my voice contains or is encoded with source light, source codes, to activate your own source light within you, and therefore anything that's out of alignment with that is going to trickle to the surface. So please, if you begin burping, yawning, sneezing, farting, let all of those things happen. Don't put your hand over your mouth when you yawn, just let it come out. It's just grief releasing from your lungs and from the cells of your being. So just continue to breathe for me, please. We're at Miracle 82. Been waiting all day to start this. There's been blooming chainsaws and God knows what else happening down the hill. They must have stopped to eat, so I'm going to try and tell this miracle as fast as I can. But it's a goodie, so I'll try not to miss some information like I did yesterday. Actually, somebody asked me, will this method work for parking fines? It's just so if you didn't listen to yesterday's miracle, it was about how to smudge out your number plate so you don't get speeding fines. A parking fine is a little bit different because you're usually stationary and your meter usually runs out and the parking meter comes along and books you. There's a couple of things you can do differently. One, you can ask God to elongate time until you get back to your car. That's the first thing. Or the second thing is you can just ask God, source, your angels to make your car invisible to the parking inspectors. So I remember once with one of my stodgy old bosses, we were like more than an hour late, and I said, don't worry about it, just stop worrying about it, it will be perfect. I'll put lots of gold light around the car and it'll be fine. And he was just like, who is this crazy woman I just employed to work for us? But as we were walking back to the car, nearly an hour late, the parking inspector guy was just coming. He's going, oh no, I've got one. I said, no, he's coming in this way, get to the car fast. So we got in the car and sped off and, not sped off, but, took off before he was like 2 cars away. So they're the kinds of miracles you can happen with parking. But today I want to talk about a different kind of miracle. And that's usually, this is a miracle about when you change your frequency and everything around you changes. And it certainly looks like the poop is hitting the fan. But if you can just stay connected to source and watch what shows up for you. So what happened for me was that I'd gone to America and had all these massive, massive miracles happen at the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon is a miracle that's already been talked about, so I'm not going to talk about them again. You can go look up that miracle if you're interested. It is also, I just put it up on my blog on my website, www.elmaraseraphin.com blog, if you can't be bothered searching through all the miracles. It is the top one on my blog. I've just realised I've forgotten to put them on my blog, so I'll start doing 2 or 3 a day to try and catch up because we're up to number 80. So I'd just come back from the Grand Canyon. Before I left for the Grand Canyon, I had an investment that was going to mature when I got back. I got an intuitive hit from Spirit to take my money out of it. I was like, no, there's only 1 month to go. There's only 1 month to go, and it was supposed to be. Always too good to be true. It was supposed to have earned $10,000 interest, so I didn't see the point in taking it out when I was so close to it maturing. Anyway, I get back from the States. I stayed an extra week in the States and spent extra money, and my cards are all run up, nice and full. And the bloody company goes bust, and I lose not only my 50,000 but the so-called $12,000 interest I was supposed to get on it. I learned that day that if it's too good to be true, it usually is. But anyway, that's been and gone. It's just money. Although I was mad as all hell about it when it happened because I had all these overdue credit cards. Not overdue, full up credit cards. I didn't usually fill up my credit cards, but they were full from overstaying. And at the time, our dollar was crap, and then one Australian dollar was like one American dollar was like two of ours. So even just to stay in a $50 motel in America was costing me $100. So anyway, I had a fantastic time at the Grand Canyon, had some experiences with wolves, which is about being a teacher. I get back to Australia, the bloody money goes bust. And then Source just puts a really nice little thought in my head. We want you to move to the Sunshine Coast, which I was living in Brisbane at the time. The Sunshine Coast was an hour north. Much lovelier, much nicer, much whatever. And these were the stats where it was at. 1, I had no money to move because of my just getting back from a holiday. 2, so I wouldn't have been able to afford to rent somewhere. 2, I had international students. I used to look after international students at the time. They were far less trouble than a housemate, and they paid nearly twice as much as what a housemate would pay. Or the college paid for them. And I was fully booked up with international students till March the next year. There was lots of things actually now I'm remembering. I had a lease that went until January, and this was about September the year before that. I'd had like a 36-month lease, I think it was, or maybe it was an 18-month lease, but it didn't run out until the January, February. And everybody's saying, you'll never get a job on the coast. Everybody wants a job on the coast, everybody. So no money, fully booked up with students, lease until January, no jobs, and sources saying, we want you to go to the Sunshine Coast. I'm like, okay. Take a breath in for me, please. Because it's going to blow your bloody mind. When I remembered it when I drove up to the Sunshine Coast the other day, I went, oh my God, I haven't told this massive miracle. So, the first thing I think that has to happen is that I have to get a job. Or, I have to be able to transfer with my job. So as ballsy as I am, I rang the area manager for the Sunshine, the bank I was working in, and I rang the area manager for the Sunshine Coast and rang him and said, look, I'm really sorry to trouble you, but I work in telephone banking. I really want to move to the Sunshine Coast. Everybody's telling me I won't get a job there. But I just wanted to let you know I came from a sales background into this job, and I can sell rice to the Chinese and ice to the Eskimos. And on my stats, we only have to convert 0.05% of our calls to sales. My conversion rate is 28.5%. Are you interested in talking to me? And he was like, by God, we are. He said, there's never been a better time to move to the coast because we've just had all these position upgrades and there's a whole pile of them available. It's like, oh, wow. He goes, give me a day, what's your number, and I'll call you back. Within a day, call me back and goes, we've got an interview for you at the Tewantin branch. So, and obviously I got that job. And then there were still these other things that needed to happen. I still had students, but all of a sudden, all of the bookings I had from the students, they all started to cancel. They all just cancelled one after the other after the other. I went, oh my God, maybe I'm supposed to move to the coast. And there was just one student who was under 18 years old. When they're under 18, they had to stay in a home. But once they're after 18, if they want to go live with their friends, they could. And I think that was actually the last thing that needed to happen, one of the last things that needed to happen. But all the students started to fall over. And then a friend of mine said to me, are you seriously going to move to the Sunshine Coast? I said, well, that's what I've been told to do, love. I said, I don't really know for sure. She goes, well, I'll tell you why. My mum used to live in Coolum, as you know, and she passed away. And she passed away without a will. So she'd passed away intestate. And we've just found out, so it was coming into summer with it being October, it's summertime, December, January here, November, December, January, February around here is the heat time. We've just found out that although we have insurance on the house, if nobody has lived in the house for 2 months, the insurance is void. So we need someone to live in the house for us because it's right opposite of Caneville. It was on the outskirts of Coolum. I said, oh, darling, I would love to, but, you know, I just don't think that I will be able to afford to live in Coolum. You know, I'll be living out the back of Burke somewhere up there. And she goes, oh, no, you don't have to pay any rent. You just have to keep the place tidy and keep the gardens lovely until we can sell it, which could be anything from 6 months to 3 years. I said, oh, okay, darling, I'd love to move to the coast for you. If that's the circumstances, yes, I can do that for you. So I had a house to live in and then I had a job. I still had a problem with 1, the students, and 2, the lease. I already had a lease on my property. Next thing, my student, I didn't tell her anything that was going on. I never told her anything, but the one student that I had left, who was a Spanish girl and a bit of a brat, but always preferred the Asian girls, the Koreans and Japanese and Chinese girls. They were always much more fun. But anyway, my bratty Spanish girl, who was booked in for a year, came to me and said, I think I'd like to move out on my 18th birthday. And I said to her, well, you know, that's the midweek. You don't want to move out midweek, do you? And she goes, well, no. I said, so the weekend. She goes, yeah. And that same weekend was the weekend that I was bound to move up north and all sorts of things. So I move up to the Sunshine Coast, which is north, just for those who are overseas. And so that would have been the same weekend that if I was going to get the lease terminated, that would have been the weekend. So the one thing left was the lease, and the real estate agent was being a prick. He's going, no, you have to pay the lease until January or whatever, and this was October or September, October, and you know, I was paying a ridiculous amount of rent for this house. It was a nice house, but it wasn't worth what I was paying, but I was paying it because I could afford it because I always had 3 or 4 students in it. But when it dropped down to 1, I wrote to every school and I got not one school give me another booking. And so I just asked for, and it turns out somebody told me this, you could just apply for hardship and get the lease broken. So that's my next step because they still won't budge. When I tell him that's what I'm going to do, he goes, fine, take us to court. He was a right prick, as they always are. Can't believe these people that you rent from and you give them, I think my rent, which doesn't sound like much now, but you've got to remember this was 30 odd years ago, about 30 years ago. I think we were paying $450 a week when the average place you could get was a couple $100 a week, So, but my students were paying me anything from $180 to $220 a week, and I had 3 or 4 bedrooms there, so that worked out fine. Didn't bother me because all I had to do was pay electricity because they basically paid for the rent and the food. So, and I only work 3 days a week anyway. So I have to go to court. On the day I have to get to court, it was at 10 a.m. in the morning. I am rushing to get there and I'm so damn stressed. I stopped to get a cup of coffee. I've got a cream shirt on. And as I'm getting in the car, I knock the cup of coffee and it goes all down the front of me. And I didn't have any clothes because they were already up in the Sunshine Coast. All I had on was this shirt that I had on. And I had to rock up to the court case with a cup of coffee, brown coffee, all drenched down, a cream shirt that I was wearing, a cream t-shirty thing over a skirt. Apologising, I didn't apologise to anyone. I was just trying to cover it up as I went in with a file or whatever. And anyway, bugging me, and I'd put my thing to it saying, this is it, this is what happened, I've always looked after these students, blah, 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 and I can't get any students and I can't afford the rent, and I'm trying to break the lease, amicably, and they won't let me do it, so they've forced my hand. And the bloody judge, me, covered in bloody coffee all down the front of me, awards it to me. I didn't even understand what he said, and in the end he says to me, ma'am, do you understand what I mean? I said, I don't understand what you mean. Can you just tell me in Dick and Dora nip and fluff type language? He goes, well, basically, I'm allowing you to be able to break this lease at this day. And it will be finalised on this day. You are responsible to pay any rent that's due up to that date, but nothing else. And... So anyway, the bottom line is he used a whole pile of jargon just to say to me, we've terminated your lease. And and he said, do you have any questions to the real estate guy? And he was like, but, and he goes, no, I've made my decision. The lease is terminated as of this date, which was the date that I was moving there, which, as I pointed out a couple of days ago, was 1 week before I got to transfer with my work. So I had 1 week. So I was up there. And I had 1 week before I still had to drive back to Brisbane for 3 days because I only work 3 days a week anyway. Drop the dogs off at the place they used to be at, and the lady who gave me the dogs, who was just up the street from work, and I was late. I was late every day that I had to go to work there, but it didn't matter because I was going or gone anyway. I also, and this is also the other gift that happened. Because the place I was moving to was fully furnished already, what it meant was that I was able to sell off most of my possessions. The stuff that I took up there, I don't even think I took a trailer load up there. I think I was able to take it up in just 2 or 3 car loads, or maybe someone came and took a trailer load of my stuff up there. But most of it just went into the garage, the stuff that I took. I seem to recall someone did take a trailer load up there for me. But I was able to sell all the things that were of value and pay off those credit cards. And so within a matter of weeks of getting back from the Grand Canyon, where I'd had these huge, huge spiritual experiences and had something big had woken up inside of me, I was no longer in a call centre with 450 people and a hell of a noise and a horrible frequency and blah, blah, blah. I was in a branch that I just couldn't believe my luck, the branch that I ended up being at. When I looked out the front of me, there was some river, and when I looked out the side window in the office, the staff office, where you had cups of tea and ate your lunch, there was a bloody great big lake. Lake Weber, I think it was called. Anyway, whatever. And it was just like I had moved to heaven after living in the city and that. And that's why Spirit wanted me to go, because it was more conducive to where I was at spiritually. And I ended up, on those other few days a week, I ended up having a stall at your Monday markets and mixing up all these potions and selling them, etc., etc. So sometimes, and remember I've spoken before about no desire is ever felt without the substance already being given. Well, I didn't really have a desire. They were just saying to me, move to the Sunshine Coast. And I was just like, God, I would love to move to the Sunshine Coast, but there's no way in a million years there's no way I can do it. And then, as I said, there was these 4 or 5 major things that needed to change, and all of them, they just collapsed and changed. I got a job on the Sunshine Coast, despite probably 350 of those 450 people I work with going, you'll never get a job on the coast. Everyone wants to move to the Sunshine Coast. I also, there was just so much that happened in that time. And I remembered that the other day when I went up to the coast just a few days ago, that's how I got there. So what's the moral of this story? The moral of this story is, when you want something to happen, ask for it, but don't tell God how it's going to happen. When they first told me to move to the Sunshine Coast, I really didn't think it's just that I guess I've worked with them for so long, they just make things happen. And it's been really cool to remember that that's what happened that time. There's heaps of other things that happen like that. But it's been really cool to remember that that's how fast the miracles can happen. And even though I had a lease, I had a job in Brisbane, and et cetera, had students all booked in, all of them broke in order for me to be able to go there. So that's our miracle for today. I'm not going to get to the 5th dimension. So I'm just going to send you all mountains and mountains of extraordinary love and light. And I really, really look forward to being with you again tomorrow. Love, love, love. And bye for now.